The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I believe we're just past 12 o'clock. Welcome to the second of a series of 11 webinars designed to give you practical information to help you accelerate the growth of your business. My name's Peter Jeffrey and I'm the Business Development Manager for the City of Greater Bendigo. On behalf of the City, we're proud to partner with the team at the Business Re-Education Centre to bring you high quality practical information about how to grow your business through simple, effective actions and measures. Please grab a pen and be ready to take notes so that you can be sure to implement actions that you identify during the session as appropriate for your business. And I strongly encourage you to act on this advice. Action is the biggest key here, even if it's the most simple suggestion that captures your attention. At the end of this webinar, there'll be mention to future events that I also encourage you to consider for future business support. Often these events are free. At the City, I work within the Economic Development Unit, and we're focused on bringing high calibre events and initiatives to enhance the success of local businesses within the community, businesses like yours. If you'd like to know more about these events, please feel free to contact us at the City of Greater Bendigo to discuss all of the options available to you for local business support and growth on the telephone number 5434 6000, so that's 6000. Now, I'd like to introduce your presenter today, Paul Henshaw, who's the Managing Director for the Business Re-Education Centre here in Bendigo. Paul's business is one of the top 100 performing Action Coach business coaching franchises. Now that's globally. It's pretty impressive considering there are 4,000 franchises globally. So a true little success story right here in Bendigo. He has also successfully coached businesses for over 20 years and has some great experience to share. So I'd like to now hand over to Paul to start this session.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's early in the afternoon, I know. I hope you're enjoying perhaps a bite to eat while you're listening in on this webinar. I would like to. I see we've got quite a few people. In fact, we've got a few more than we had in our first one, which is great to see that the numbers are growing. Today's webinar is called Turn Tyre Kickers into Money in the Bank, which means that what we're going to be talking about is, yes folks, sales. We're going to be talking about, how to get a higher conversion rate of those that are inquiring with you into transactions. Before we go too much further, I wonder if I might be able to get people to maybe type in just a little bit of for those that haven't been on our webinars before, you'll probably see on the right-hand side of your screen a control panel of your own. I'm looking at one that's actually a little bit more complicated, but you should have a control panel on the right-hand side. If you haven't, you'll see a little orange arrow up the top right-hand side, and if you click on that, if it's facing left and you clicked on it, it should open up your control panel. If it's facing right, one or the other. It's a little orange arrow anyway that's horizontal. It'll open and close your control panel. I wonder if I could just get people to perhaps just even just type in what's their hometown, where are they listening from, what's the town that they're actually listening from. Two reasons here. I can gauge whether you can get to your dashboard, and the other thing is that you can hear me okay. So if you could, let me just see whether you can type in a few place names. Okay, so we've got a few: Eaglehawk and Bendigo and Huntley and good, and a few others. Still seeing a few more coming up. Bendigo, thanks everyone. That's great. A few more. Be terrific just to be able to see where everybody's from. Generally pretty close. I see we had somebody, I think our furthest listener, Strathfield, say thanks for that. I see our furthest participants, Alice Springs. So we're going we're going around Australia as I speak to you right now, but certainly a lot of local people as well from Bendigo, and we're transmitting, of course, from Will Street in Bendigo. So thanks for that, meaning that you can both hear me and you can find the keyboard to answer anything. Look, the other thing is that from time to time through this, you'll see a big question mark come up. If you've got any question, either type it in. The best thing to do is type it in, because I generally find if you raise your hand and I open up your microphone, sometimes that doesn't work so well. So a question typed in is going to be much better for us to be able to answer. So I'll get me off the screen now, and we'll go on to the guts of this presentation, guys. So you've seen a little bit about me, and I know that there are a lot of people on the webinar today that actually already know me, and you know, we've met in other circumstances, whether it be one-on-one or through other webinars or even seminars. So you'll know that I am a passionate promoter of small business, and today we want to make your small business better than it is through improving your sales. And can we do that in an hour? I reckon we can. Let's get started. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is recognise or see whether any of these are familiar, or you've experienced them, and you've certainly perhaps experienced them in other businesses, but you may not necessarily have thought that they were true of your own. My observations around what I've seen in terms of sales. Now, this is not about retail sales. This is about sales generally. So retail, service providers, trades, professional services, etc. So my observations. Number one, my first observation is that people make assumptions around their clients. They take what they look like as being indicative of their buying intentions. You know, you've got to be careful that in our photo here, you've got to be careful that people aren't disguised. I've seen, and you've probably heard the story of the farmer that goes in to buy the brand new car in his pretty dirty overalls, and is sort of virtually ignored because the assumption is that, oh, well, he probably wouldn't be able to afford this, into the BMW dealership, and then the BMW salesperson a little bit shocked to see him driving past a few days later in a brand new Mercedes. So you can't assume anything in sales. Everybody is there for a reason, and everybody is a potential buyer. That's not to say that you don't qualify, but you certainly don't qualify too early in the piece. The second thing that I've seen is what I call underwhelming opening statements, and that means that initial engagement can be pretty poor. And when we get into our 7 steps of selling, you'll appreciate why an underwhelming opening statement is putting a barrier in your sales right from the start. So, you know, in the typical retail response of, you know, can I help you, is never going to end well, to be honest. It's a constraint right from the start. What happens is, for those types of statements that are, if you like, known to the receiver, we end up with a response, habit-based response. So someone says, you know, can I help you? Before you even think of it, you said, no thanks, I'm just looking. Now, did you think that, or was that just a triggered response? And the challenge in sales is to get a response, number one, that's not triggered, and number two, that's actually interesting. So some underwhelming opening statements, I think, is another thing that I've certainly seen in sales. The third thing that I've seen, no connection or poor connection. Sometimes it comes from that first opening statement, but what I'm seeing is no personal connection between the salesperson and the prospect. So not forming a solid personal connection. And again, as we go through to today, we'll understand why that personal or that connection's massively important to the success of a sale. So the next thing that I've seen. The picture you'll see here, of course, is our famous Swiss Army knife. I don't know how you'd actually put this particular one in your pocket, but if the Swiss Army is using this particular tool, they'd probably be shot before they could actually open it up. But fundamentally, what happens here is I've seen too many salespeople or people in sales positions talking features, number one, and bringing them out too early. Again, when we go through our 7 steps, you'll see where that's best suited, where that actually is appropriate, but more likely also what the extension to that talking features are. The assumptive selling that sort of someone walks in, makes a single statement, and then the salesperson immediately assumes that they need to break into some sort of features-based presentation of a product. We'll see why that doesn't work. It certainly doesn't work in the percentage of cases. And I think the 5th point, lastly, observations, there's no ability or attempt to close. So every sale needs to be, we talk sales speak here, we talk about has to be closed. So what that means is finalised. I don't know about you, the guys that are listening or on the webinar, but the amount of times where I've actually had to close myself into a sale as a prospect or as a buyer, I find astounding. So what that means is the preparedness for somebody to simply walk out without any attempt to actually convert that person into a sale. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all, but I would suggest that it cannot happen as often as 75% of occasions. In fact, there was a survey done, not in Bendigo, but in terms of regionally, and as I recall, that survey discovered something like an 86% of occasions where there was no close to a sales conversation. Now, whilst that's astounding, it may not be astounding. You might have, I think it all sits in beliefs around, let's call it, around beliefs around sales and around salespeople. And your challenge as a salesperson is if you have those beliefs that are, I don't like salespeople, I think all salespeople are pushy, then I would suggest that as a salesperson yourself, then you may be actually challenged in doing what you need to do as a in sales to actually, achieve the outcomes that you're looking for. So let's have a look and see what there's some of the observations that I've certainly seen. What are the outcomes of that type of behaviour? Well, you can see the crashing arrow, but what are some of the outcomes? Pardon me. High marketing costs. What does that mean? It means that we're spending a lot of money on marketing if we're not closing. If our closing rate is poor, let's assume that, let's say that you're selling to 2 in 10. Okay. So if I don't change my sales methodology, oh dear, a bit of a scratchy throat. If I don't change my sales methodology, I'm going to, the 2 in 10 is going to stay pretty much the same, because Einstein's definition of insanity was continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. So if nothing changes in our sales approach, then nothing will change in our conversion rate. What that means then is for me to actually increase my sales, I'm going to need to increase my marketing or my leads, which leads to higher marketing costs, because, the marketing area of your business is the most risky, it's the most unreliable, and it's often the most expensive. It's certainly more expensive than sales. Sales changes, marketing changes generally require an external spend, and that can be expensive. So I see a lot of marketing which is going, if you like, unconverted, spent and unconverted. I'll give you an example of that. There's recently I have had first-hand experience about a particular business's sales methodology, or sales, let's say, less than satisfactory. So what I saw was that they were spending quite a bit of money, and I'm not naming the company, but I saw them spending quite a bit of money recently on media, which wouldn't have come cheaply and reasonably effective, so that they seemed to be doing all the right things in terms of marketing. They in fact generated a lead from me personally in a particular product. The product required it was a home product, and it required an appointment to be made, which is a sales appointment, to be made and booked in and come to my home to discuss the particular requirement. An appointment was made, and I think the day before that appointment was due, they rang up and cancelled the appointment and said, "Oh, okay, we'll make another one." Okay, I guess I can accept that. The second appointment was made. Half an hour after the appointment was due, a phone call was received to say, "I'm sorry, but we won't be there. Can we make another time?" Now, this is a company that's spent a lot of money on marketing, but in fact now hasn't converted anything due to their own poor follow-up processes. So this is the example, I guess, I'm quoting around high marketing costs as an outcome of poor sales conversion. Frustrated salespeople is the second point. We have salespeople, we have people on the floor or people on the phone or whatever that are sort of taking calls, if you like, taking inquiries, and then finding people going not buying, and in fact not being able to return the salesperson's call after the event. So frustration I see in salespeople, and a lack of understanding about, well, I just don't understand what's going on there. Of course, these things result in poor profitability. Profitability comes from sales. Now, if we spend a lot of money on marketing and we spend a decent amount of money on the sales process that isn't converted, sadly, of course, we only get paid for the work we do, and if we can't sell it, we don't get to do it, and if we don't do it, we can't make profit. So low profits, time productivity, again, lots of time spent in the activity of selling without an outcome. So at the end of the day, that is productivity unrealised. And of course, unsatisfied clients, meaning the prospect was in fact looking for something and not necessarily finding it, or certainly not being completed, their satisfaction, or they're left unsatisfied. So let's see what we do about it. What we do about it is we actually look at and see how can we improve our selling skills. And again, the differentiation here is, when does selling start? When does marketing stop, and when does selling start? Well, marketing stops once somebody has responded to your marketing. That is the end of marketing. It's at that point in time, whether it be an inquiry, an email inquiry, a telephone call, a walk-in, a web inquiry, that's when selling starts. So this is where we want to pick up from. If you're looking at your sales process, assume that the trigger is an email, a phone call, a walk-in, an inquiry through a website. I think they're predominantly probably going to be your four major areas or your four major triggers. That's when your selling process starts, and that's where we're starting in terms of our selling process. A couple of things we need to consider when we're in sales. Actually, I think there's three here. The first is that a good salesperson is a problem solver. What's that mean? Okay, everybody that comes to you has a problem. Assume that they have a problem, and your job is to look for and provide a solution. Now, you may not always be able to provide that solution through your own product range or your own business, but you are effectively in the business of problem solving. And that's a really positive attribute or positive characteristics to keep in your head. So basically your job is to help the customer find what they need. If you've got it, it's great. If you haven't got it, unfortunate, but if you help them to find their solution, there's always going to be a sale somewhere down the track as well. So that's the first thing we've got to keep in our mind. As salesperson is somebody who is a problem solver and there to help a customer find what they need. The second part about sales mindset is I'm not sure what if I was to ask you right now, what's your thoughts when I say the word salesperson. Maybe you could type some words. This might be an opportunity for us to type some words in. Go to your input and just give me a word that in your mind. Perhaps I've already preempted something here, but what are some of the what's your thoughts when it comes to salesperson? I'll have a look and let's just see what comes up. Yeah, having a USP. Consultant is a sort of somebody that gives advice for sure. So that's a positive one. Knowledgeable, all positives. This is good. They may not all be knowledgeable. They may not all be good responses. Thanks for those comments. Pushy. There. Thank you for that. That's these are some sort of, let's say, positive connotations or negative connotations. You'd have to assume that the term pushy is a negative one, and thanks for that input, because that's quite often what we think around that. I want to show you today actually how pushy has come to be and how you can sell without being that. And in fact, we do have 4 types of salespeople. The only one that I really want to pursue is the one that does this, that someone who solves problem and professionally helping people to buy. I personally always think of that way in terms of selling, that if I position clients position themselves, and in fact my products as well, that I am there to professionally help people to buy, then it changes the nature of the mindset. Because if you've got a mindset that's negative around sales, you're going to be challenged in making those sales. A little slide that I think you probably appreciate the visual here, that says if you're in sales and you fear rejection, you've picked the wrong way to make a living. Because the end of the day is you won't get 100% of sales that you are involved in. So please, one thing that I have to probably say straight up is whenever you're in sales, don't assume that when someone doesn't buy that it's a indication of rejection. I always think personally they're not ready to buy yet. And if you put a yet on the end of it, it makes a huge difference to the way you actually might think about it. Because, at the end of the day, if you go home thinking about all the sales you didn't make rather than the ones that you did, you could end up doing your own head in. So sales is very much about staying positive and staying I guess in the moment, or in terms of positivity around making them. If you think, as I say, if you think you can't, then you probably can't. Okay, so let's look at methodology. Now that we've positioned the head a little bit, let's look at methodology. So our methodology that I want to take you through today is a 7-step process. Now, it doesn't matter what you sell. All of these processes are completely applicable to every type of sale. What I'd like you to think about as we go through this is how will you in your business apply that step? What will you actually do in that step to move through it? So let's actually have a look at these 7 steps. Okay, we'll go through each one independently, but I'll put them up on the screen now so that you can see what the 7 steps are. The first one is about building rapport, and that means a connection. And you remember when I showed the slide a little way back, I showed that the pink electrical cord with no connection. So the first one is we have to form a connection between the buyer and the seller, and that means we need to form a personal connection. And what that's going to require is an amount of emotional intelligence. You may have heard that term before, shortened to EI. Emotional intelligence being my ability to communicate and understand the person that I'm talking to. Of course, it extends way beyond sales. It goes into all of our communications and all of our relationships, where we need a increased level of emotional intelligence. So if there's one thing that you can work on in step one, it's your level of emotional intelligence. I'll talk about that as we go through each one. The second one is identifying the need. We have to understand need. We can replace need with want, and that's fine too. And that's all about asking questions, but not just any old questions, good questions. We'll go through what's a good question. The number three, creating urgency, selling it today. I wonder how often many you've had the I'll just need to think about it. So what we want to do is look and see, okay, how do we get rid of, or how do we reduce the amount of think about it's into do it's? Okay, so creating urgency is an aspect that we really all need to do. Temperature checking, meaning how are we going? You know, staying aligned with the process, checking that you're progressing through a sale, and not just either assuming that you're progressing through a sale, or in fact, you know, not knowing when you've lost it. So temperature checking is our fourth. Our fifth is presenting solutions. Now, this is often where people who are in sales, this is the area where often they are actually strong. They know their product well. They know how it works, and they know its application. So generally, you know, this step five can be strong, but also, you know, may not be. I mean, you know, if the person, now we're finding lots of people have already done their research, and they'll often be quite savvy about the products that they're actually buying. So they have a higher level of pre-existing knowledge often when you first interact or when you meet them. And so presenting solutions requires both knowledge and flexibility. Number six is, of course, overcoming objections, and I say stepping over the hurdles. We'll talk about how you do that, but it's a necessary part of the sales process. In fact, if there are no objections, often I'm generally surprised, and in fact sometimes think, well, if there's no objections, there's potentially no interest either. And lastly, of course, converting or closing the sale. So there are 7 steps, and that's what we'll be running through on this webinar now, talking about each one of those with a little bit more depth. Hopefully you're still with me. Okay, so this is now an indicator now of what I call the sales clock of those 7 steps. Now, you'll see that the clock, obviously there are 7 steps, and you'll see that they're not evenly spaced. You'll see that some steps are bigger than others. Some are small, some are big. What I've found is these 7 steps are always applicable, and if you scrimp on one, in this case 1, then you will increase another one. So the time frame is the same, it's just how these are spread. My clock face here is an indicator of what I believe the effort, not necessarily the time, but the effort required in each of these steps to be. So the size of the block is indicative of the effort that is required, and to a certain extent the skill base that's required in each of the 7 steps. So you'll see now as we go around the clock that number 1, which is about building rapport, requires quite a bit. So, and you'll also see straight from this clock that providing solutions, which is understanding your product and its application and how that's going to work for your prospect, how that's how the size of that as well. In fact, you'll see that 3/4 of this clock is actually taken with the first 4 steps. So let's look at the first of those steps, and that's about building rapport. Now, what's rapport? Connection. Fundamentally, your job initially is to put the prospect at ease. There's no point creating anything other than that in the first step. the order of sales is always going to be that you, the salesperson, the business, and then the product. So might be useful to sort of write that down, is that the first thing they've got to buy is you, the second thing they've got to buy is the company, and the third thing they have to buy is the product. And that's why rapport building is so important. You need to build rapport personally, and you need to build rapport with the company as well. So I've got a few areas there that you can use to help build rapport. Number one's appropriateness. You know, how do you look? How do you speak? And you know, how do you act that is appropriate to the position that you're in? I'll give you an example that you might go to a dentist, or for instance, and if you walked into that dentist surgery and it looked a bit shabby, and I won't say anything about the magazines because they're always out of date, but anyway, it might look a bit shabby. The staff might be, you know, fairly abrupt, but more importantly, you know, what if you walked into the dental surgery, and I'll assume this dentist is a male for the purpose of the exercise, but what if you walked into that dental surgery and they didn't look like what you expected the dentist to look like? You know, what if they were in a blue singlet and shorts and stubbies? You might think well, this doesn't look appropriate. This person doesn't look like a dentist. So, as an example, do you look like what you should look like in your role in sales? Do you look appropriate for the part? Do you speak appropriately? Do you use the words, or do you use language that is appropriate to your client? That's the most important thing, because you're trying to, you know, what you're doing here is you're forming a connection between yourself and the client. So all of those things matter. First impressions matter, as we know, but why do they matter? Because they actually affect rapport building. Again, once the rapport, if there's no rapport, there's most often no sale. Sometimes you get away with it, but most times you actually won't. Commonality is the second part about it. So this is a little bit about, you know, how do we find links? What are you looking for around links between yourself and the prospect? Very often, you know, what's the most common opening line? It's not very good, but what's the most common opening line will often be something, even with a friend or an associate or colleague, something to do with the weather. Why is the weather a reasonable place to start? Because we're all experiencing the same weather. We pretty much know what the weather's like, so it's a form of commonality to actually refer to it, if that makes sense. But you know, you've got to be a bit smarter than that. You can't be just about the weather. But what you're looking for in forming a rapport is, you know, what's the age of the person? What is the style of the person? Do they have kids? You know, often if I'm going to a business's premises myself, I will look around and find out, you know, how do I start to pick up on some of the clues that will tell me a little bit about the person, so that I can actually engage in a personal conversation about them rather than just launching into a business conversation. That's important. And the third thing is the credibility. So the things that affect credibility in your business, particularly with the business, are, you know, your own experiences, your own level of expertise, your own qualifications, and that of the company. This is why things like awards and community contributions and these sorts of things, these are the sorts of things that actually add to your credibility. So again, you know, awards that the business has won, qualifications that you actually have in what you do particularly, these are actually all things that actually help form rapport. So it's not just about what you say, it's also about how you look, and it's also about your actions. All of those things influence rapport. And why do they? Because they actually are all forms of communication. So you're communicating with your prospects very often before you even think that you are. So communication, we'll talk about the 3 levels of communication, but communication is what we're talking about here. How effective is your communication? And if you want to know how effective it is, then this little truism might be something you might write down. True communication is determined by the response you get. So if you're getting poor responses, you're not communicating well. And that's pretty much the bottom line. You know, your response is based on some form of output. If that output is inappropriate, poorly received, poorly understood, it's not the fault, dare I say, of the receiver. It's up to the communicator or the sender to actually alter that level of communication to get the right response. It's really important because it brings it back to you. It means that you can do something about it by changing your communications and your method of communication. So let's have a look at some of the tools of communication. Of course, the words that we use, which is the content of our language, naturally is a form of communication. The language, even in terms of dialects or whatever, so we pretty much understand that the words that we use are definitely a form of communication. What we might understand is that our tonality, our voice, is a form of communication. So what does that mean? Pitch, speed, those attributes of not just the content but the context is also a form of communication. As you'd appreciate, shouting the same words and softly spoken words have a different level, are received differently from by the receiver. So therefore, context makes a difference, or voice. So remember those things. Pitch, speed are important forms of communication. And here's the third one: body language. The body language is in fact a huge tool of communication. Imagine somebody sitting with a scowl on their face and their arms crossed, and I use this only as a an example that is a long way away from obviously what you'd be doing, but you know, body language in terms of as a communicator can't be underestimated. In fact, I'll show you what the representation of this is. In fact, 7% of communication is actually content, the words that we use. 38% is in fact tonality and pace, and 55% of your communication is communicated by your body language. Now, you might think you're on the phone and it doesn't matter. It still matters. Body language is transmitted through the phone as much as anything else. Hence the reason things like, can you tell if someone's smiling or angry through the phone? Yes, you can. It's very easy to almost picture the person at the other end based on, and in fact, if you change your body language both in phone and personal, it makes probably, here's the thing, probably doesn't make as much difference in email, but here's where email is often misunderstood, because what is it? It's content, and content is a poor form of communication in its own right. Hence the reason why I would never try to actually pursue an entire sales process by email. I would never try to actually create an introduction by email. It might be initial connection, but it's never going to get much further if you don't end up moving to different forms of communication. So those are numbers that I think are important to understand, that 93% isn't about content, it's about context, and body language is another aspect of context. Okay, so the first thing we needed to do was think about how well we're building rapport. The second thing we need to do is understand is investigate how well we're understanding needs. So the person, the prospect, has a need or a want. Your job is to find out what that is, because here's the rub. Nobody buys anything that doesn't satisfy their needs. So if you don't know what their need is, you can't actually provide a solution to a problem that you don't know about. You also can't provide a solution to a problem you would suggest that they don't have. So what this understanding needs is about uncovering the problem. Okay. Assume that everybody's got a problem, even if they don't have a, you could sort of say, well, what's the problem? I've got a good Commodore, but I'm talking to somebody about a new Porsche. Where's the challenge in not having one? Okay, you could sort of say that's a want, not a need. It depends. It will depend. So we've got to understand their needs. Now, I put this picture up because for those of you who are perhaps in the generation of mine, you might be familiar with the gentleman on the right-hand side of your screen. His name was Columbo, played by Peter Falk, and his investigative style was very much play dumb and dig deep, if you recall. He would ask questions that he potentially, as the viewer, we already knew that he knew the answer to, but he asked them anyway. Why? Because he got the prospect, or in his case, the suspect, to actually vocalise that themselves. And that's what your objective is. Yes, you need to understand what the needs of the prospect are, but just as importantly, they need to get clearer, and they'll get clearer by asking good questions. So our questioning process is always going to be open-ended based. Now, open-ended questions are questions that can't be answered with a yes or no. They start with who, what, where, when, and how. If you start questions with those 5 words, you'll find that you don't get yes-no answers, and in fact you get data, you get information that comes forward. You'll get deeper information, you'll get better information by asking open-ended questions. So what have you got to do? You've got to start to look and say, what are the questions that my business needs to ask to actually walk through and get closer to being able to do what? Simply move to the next step. So every step in this process is only designed to get to the next step. It's not to, in its own right, make a sale. There's only one step that makes a sale, and it's the last one. Every other step is designed to get to the next step. So we're actually asking questions that are relevant to our product, that you're trying to understand the client's need. What's really important here in sales is to listen. They say, a good thing to remember, 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in proportion. The client or prospect should be doing more talking than you. Good sales is good listening. So you might think, sales is all about talking. It's actually all about, initially, it's all about listening. So good questioners, if we think about some of the best presenters, the best interviewers, people like David Frost, these sorts of people. I remember Andrew Denton used to be somebody who I particularly like to listen to. Why? Because they seem to be able to uncover, as a result of their interviewing, I knew more about the person they were interviewing. Why? They fundamentally asked a question, and their next question was based on the answer that they were given to the last question. They didn't just have, a set of 20 questions and simply go, 1 to 20. What they do, and what you need to do, is ask a good question, listen to the answer, give positive strokes, which is simply nodding, acknowledgement, and listening, and your next question be based on the answer. So what it means is that you are getting depth rather than breadth. You're not asking a range of surface level questions, you're asking questions that actually dig a little bit deeper. So really important here is to listen to the answer and ask a question that's related to that answer and try and dig as deeply into the need as you possibly can. A positive stroke is merely a recognition or an affirmation, if you like, that you're listening and that you understand. You know, very simply put, the aha and the nods are positive strokes. You'll find that people, if you give those positive strokes, they will continue to actually talk, and they will continue to give you more and more information. As soon as you take over the talking, you now virtually said, I've got enough information, or I think I have, and that's a mistake. Okay, so we question, we listen, we give positive strokes. Back to that one. So our questioning process needs to be sufficient to enable both you and the client or prospect to have actually potentially uncovered some information that they may not have necessarily even known themselves about their own needs. So your job as a salesperson is to ask really good questions to uncover depth of need and understand their requirement very fully. Hopefully that makes sense. Where do we go from there? What we got from there is, now typically what would happen next is, great, I think I understand where you're coming from. I can, based on the answers that you've given me, I've got all this information. I'm going to go straight into now, great, well, the thing that I think would suit you best would be, wrong. Let's stop for a minute. Let's go to step 3, and I call it disturb the need. Disturb the need, understand it, and then disturb it. What does that mean? We understand that 80% of sales are made on emotion, and then the logic that follows is purely to reinforce the decision. So what you'll do is you'll make an emotional decision, and then you will justify it logically. Oh, well, I guess that, you know, if we pay that much more, it'll probably last a lot longer. That's a logical presumption based on an emotional decision. So you're justifying the emotional decision. That is typical. That's fundamentally how most people make their decisions, emotionally. So if you haven't reached emotion through your needs, your questioning of your needs, then you haven't gotten far enough. And here's where you'll eliminate the I'll just think about it. Here's where you'll eliminate the whole, you know, one day I might buy it. Uncover why it matters, not just what it is and why it's necessary, but why that matters. Why does it matter that you have that? Who does it affect? What's the extent of it? So a good question to ask is, you know, why do you need to do something about this now? Who's it going to affect? What's going to happen if you don't have it? Why wouldn't you just do nothing? Unless you can actually understand the answers to those questions, you can't create urgency. And in fact, you're not creating urgency. You're helping create urgency for the prospect. I say the word prospect, obviously, because the sale hasn't been made. So what we're looking for here is to try and get another level of understanding, which is at an emotional level, not necessarily just a logical level. Very often those first set of questions will be logical, 20% of sales. Get to emotional, get to why it matters, then you'll actually start to get into the emotional connection with that requirement. Hopefully you understand what I'm talking about there. Okay, so reaching emotion will actually massively increase the conversion rate and also the speed of conversion, which is meaning I'll think of starting to eliminate the I'll think about it. Emotion is happy, sad. Okay, where's the connection? Okay. Anybody got a question at this stage? Anybody got a question that I can, or will I move forward? I'm not seeing any questions. Hopefully you're all awake and still with me on this. We'll move into our 4th section. Okay, we'll move forward. Okay, so how do we get from the emotional, how do we get from the needs and the emotional connection to, let's say, your presentation of your solution? And that's what you're really there to do. You're there to actually now, based on what so let me see if I understand your situation. Based on what you've told me, my understanding is Does that make sense? So let me see. That's a great bridging question to get from step 3 to step 4. All of these wedges need a connector. Some of them flow into the other, one into the other, but fundamentally this is one that will move you from questioning to presentation. Let me just see if I understand your situation. This is where you're at. So what are you doing? You're summating what you've established with the client. What you really want here is to do what? Before you go forward, you want to make sure that you actually have a really clear understanding of their needs. Make sense? So don't go forward until you've actually asked this question. Let me see if I understand your situation. From what you're telling me, here's what I understand your requirement, your needs are. Here's why I understand it's important to you. So based on what you've told me, bang, away. And then we can use the second part of this. Based on what you've told me, my recommendations will be, away we go, into what? Providing solutions. So here's where I'm going to actually need to know my products and my services very well, because what I need to be able to do is I need to be able to connect what I'm recommending with the needs that you've told me, with what I believe to be your needs. And I need to understand that the reason why I need those understandings is so that I can provide the best solution that I have. Okay, so what does that look like? That is fundamentally understanding the features of your product, but certainly understanding what the benefits of that product are. Remember, you know, features are well, if we take our knife, our Swiss Army knife, the features will be it has a saw blade, it has 3 screwdrivers, it has this, it has that, it has a pump that'll do this, it has a, you know, my product has all these, or my services have all these things. These are the features, but what are the benefits? So tell me about what that means. I'll use an example, one that just came to mind, a client that sold what do you call it, spa pools, spa baths, spa pools, outdoor. Okay, so the features will be it's got 2 3.5 horsepower pumps. Okay, the benefit of that is, what is the benefit of that is? Well, the fact that it's got 2 means that if for some reason one of them does happen to, play up on you, the other one will still, so you won't need to cancel your spa party. You'll still be able to enjoy the benefits of that. Or what is the benefit of having so much power behind? So if the pump provides the power, and it's a 3, I don't know much about pumps, so 3.5 horsepower, that might blast you out of the pond, I'm not sure, but that's the feature. The benefit of that would be what? So it's really important to when understanding, when researching and understanding your own product range, that you, yes, understand the features, but you have to understand what the benefits are. Now, what we need to do is we need to be able to tie those benefits back to the needs that you said. Nobody walks into the spa pool and potentially says, I need a spa with a 3.5 horsepower motor. What they talk about is what their requirements will be. We're going to have this many, we use for parties, I've got kids, etc. The benefits are usually associated to the client. So they're the things that we need to actually be tying to the uncovered needs. So this particular product or this particular service, the reason why I'm recommending it is it has these features, the benefits of which are these, which is predominantly connected to what you were telling me about XYZ. Hopefully that sort of makes sense. So what we're looking for here is to tie the solutions back to the needs. The reason I'm recommending this is, now if we understand a little bit more about emotional intelligence, one of the things that we'll understand is that there are also different types of people. Without going into that fully, because I could do I could probably do a day's course on this analysis, but understand that there are 4 types of people. One wants fast responses, one likes choice. They are the people who like to control the situation. You think they know what they need, etc. They like choices. They like to be given choices. The second type like to be connected with other people. So they're influenced by they're influenced very much by what other people are buying and what other people are using. The third type like to be recommended something. They don't like lots of choices. They are the sort of the stable, slower to make decision type people. And the fourth type are the data-oriented type people. They like lots of facts and figures. So understanding, and this is a challenge, and I can't go too much into it in this particular webinar, but we'll look at that in another one, is how to recognise those. But if those sorts of people sort of make sense that, yeah, I've experienced those types of people, then the connections are also important. But anyway, we might have gone off on a tangent there. Most importantly, what we really need to do is connect benefits with needs, and features are connected to benefits. So this is really understanding your product very well and being able to actually present it well. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Okay, moving forward, we now need to actually understand, are we going in the right direction here? Checking temperature is a terminology that suggests we've got to find out whether we're going in the right direction. And the question says, how does that fit with what you had in mind? That's a temperature check. What have I got? I'm only going to be hot. You remember the old games that we used to play and as kids, and if you were close, they'd say you were hot, and if you were a long way away from what you were looking for, you'd say it was cold. That's pretty much what we're doing here. We're temperature checking. Are we hot or cold? How does that fit with what you had in mind? You're either a mile away or a little bit away, in which case you might have to go back and actually uncover a few needs, maybe that you didn't get the first time, or yes, it does fit, it's what I'm looking for, seems to fit, happy with that. So we're either going to go back at this stage to, okay, let's go back and try and find a little bit more information about why it doesn't fit. And usually that's because you didn't maybe perhaps listen hard enough. There's certain things that they said that you didn't pick up, or that it does, and we can go forward. Okay, if we go back, I'll go back to this picture. If we go back, we're going to go back to understanding needs, providing different solutions, something you didn't catch the first time, or we're going to go forward to potentially overcoming objections. How does that fit with what you had in mind? Yeah, all looks great, but listen for the but. Whatever comes after that, that's the objection. Okay? So let's look at overcoming objections. Now, the first thing you have to understand about objections are a good thing. If people are really disinterested, you've got no connection, there's nothing happening there, the lights are on but nobody's home, they probably won't even raise an objection. So consider objections to be a good thing. Objections are your opportunity to actually move it to a sale. Understand that objections are part of the selling process. So how do we do that? Number one, encourage, empathise. Yep, I see where you're coming from. I can understand why that could be a bit of a challenge. Let me just, and I'm going around the circle here, let me just clarify what exactly what I believe the challenge is and how I'm understanding it. Is that right? Confirm your understanding. Is that where you're at the moment? Okay. Let's have a look and see how we can overcome that. How does that sit? Are we good to go forward? Fundamentally, what I've just done is go around that circle. The framework of that is always going to be pretty much the same. One thing we'll move on to here very quickly is this one, and I call it materialise the ghost. If you're not able to actually raise the objection, if you can't clearly understand what the objection is, then it's a ghost that you can't grab, and consequently people will walk away and you'll go, well, I have no idea why that didn't turn into a sale. You have to be able to there and then materialise the ghost, and that means you can do it yourself. Okay, so based on what you're telling me, well, it seems like you're not comfortable to go forward. Now, it could be that you don't think that the match is a good one. It could be that, whatever you need to understand what are the common objections, and you can literally reel them off to the end where you can go, well, it doesn't seem to be any of those, so maybe it's about price. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because now you've raised the objection. You've brought the price objection out. Well, yeah, it is a little bit more than I thought that ought to be. Okay, let's address that. Is that the only challenge that you have? Is price the only thing that's stopping you from going forward? If the answer is yes, then you need to address the price issue. Let's actually have a look at that. How could we make it more affordable? Doesn't necessarily mean the price has dropped. It might be around payments. It might be around terms. It might be around. It might be about reducing the value of the product so that it matches their price better. If you asked enough questions, you would have known what their price bracket was in the first place. But of course, if you didn't form good enough rapport, they wouldn't have told you the truth. So you can see why this wheel works. So we need to be able to actually get that out. We need to raise the objections. If they're not raising the objections themselves, or then raise them for them. Might it be, do you think maybe it's not exactly what you're looking at? Maybe the colour's not quite right. Maybe the style's not quite right. Maybe our timing's not quite right. Maybe this, maybe that. Lots of maybes. You can raise the objection. You can materialise the ghost. Because unless you do, you've got nothing to grab. And unless you can grab something, you can't overcome the objection. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Any questions before we knock it over? We're about 1 o'clock, so we're just on finishing up. Hopefully you've all... I know this is trying to do, sales courses in 1 hour. This is a framework for sales. Your content for all of this needs to be developed for your particular product, which is something we do when we do one-on-ones type of an approach. But right now we're actually going through the framework. All right, moving forward then, the last step is of course step 7, which you can see it's actually quite small. If you've done 1 to 6 really poorly, step 7 will be really hard and really big. But if you work through these steps, then you'll find step 7 is simply just a final process of close. Now there's a number of ways to close, either or questions, so payment or delivery. So things like, so how did you want to pay for that? When would you like it delivered? When do we need to be there? When would you like to book it in? If it's an appointment, when would you like to book it in? They're closes. Believe it or not, they're all closes. And then finally, things like how do you actually close? Congratulations, you're going to love the new whatever. You're going to love that. It's a great decision, which is reinforcement. Another one will be, so can you see yourself? So how are you going to use that? When do you think you'll get your first use out of that? When do you think you'll actually be able to? How soon will you be able to actually be able to use that? These are all closes that are, we'll call them soft closes. A close isn't, do you want to buy it? That's not a close. That's well, it probably is, but it's pretty hard. So you're actually using statements like that to actually close off the thing. How did you want to pay for it? I've seen people who do it well and sort of say, I'll just put that next to the counter in case there's anything else you need. So fundamentally, they've closed the initial sale. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, I want to quickly just tell you, and then I want to quickly tell you a couple of things that are coming up. There's a seminar on March the 19th called 6 Steps to Growth. We're not quite finished, by the way, the webinar. I've got a last slide to show you after this. You can register for that. There's still a week to go. I think we're about 2/3 full. So there's probably about 20 seats left if you want to grab a spot in that. It's a face-to-face. It's about a 2-hour seminar next Thursday night. 6 Steps to Growing Your Business. I think everybody will get, it doesn't matter what size your business is now, it's all about growing it. The other one is our next webinar is on the 9th of April, and it's called Get the Clients You Really Want. There's a link there for bookings. This webinar will be put up on our website afterwards, so these links will be there. They're also currently on our website now. If you wanted to do a one-on-one discovery session, that is to uncover the opportunities in your business, I currently do that. It's $200, and all the money for that is my attempt to improve the resources for mental health in Bendigo. So it's my own cause, and I use that to support it. But what happens is I end up happy that I've been able to provide an opportunity for a business to proceed and move forward. Makes me feel good, certainly makes the business owner feel good, and a good cause receives the outcome. So if you'd like to book one of those, you simply need to send me an email and say, hey, I'd like to book a discovery session with you. And it's usually a couple of hours, and the last one was a few days ago, and someone walked out of my discovery session. They walked in thinking that they'd had enough of this business, and they walked out with about 3 or 4 years of enthusiasm. So if you're thinking like, you need to actually you're not currently looking at opportunities, or you're not in a position, or you need some extra input, then I'd suggest you look at that. And lastly, if you want us to help you put a sales process, your own sales process in place, we can do that through literally sales training, so we can go to the next level with you. Good. Just a few little things. So just to finish off, I want to tell you that out of every sales call, an inquiry that you get, you always get one of 4 things. You'll either get the sale, and if you follow those 7 processes, your conversion rate will go up dramatically. I can guarantee it. The second thing you'll get is a future sale. You may not be able to help them at the time, but you might have recommended, you might have actually sort of said, based on what you told me, I don't think that any of the things that we've got right now are what you're looking for, and here's my suggestion. I can almost guarantee you'll get a future sale out of that. The third thing you can get is a referral. Well, obviously we can't help you with right now, but do you think there's anybody else that we might be able to? Is there anybody else that you think that might be suited to what we actually have? Or the fourth thing is you'll get a lesson. And if you don't take the lesson, you're deemed to actually repeat the mistakes. So what you need to do at the end of every sales cycle is you need to do a little bit of self-analysis. How did I go in that? How did I step through the processes? Where do I think that I might have? Where do I think I was strong? Where perhaps do I think I need to improve? That's the way that salespeople get better. Practice, review, preferably with somebody else as well, and readjust. That's the only way to get better. Sales is one of the most important parts of your business, and it sometimes receives the least attention in terms of getting better. So, time's up. Well, in fact, time's over, 5 minutes over. What I guess remind you of, that replays of this are going to be available. businessreeducation.com.au/webinar recordings, or just go businessreeducation.com.au and you'll see the tab. You'll be able to download this as both audio and visual, and they'll also be available on the City of Greater Bendigo's website /business. Ours will be up quicker than theirs, purely because it's probably an easier process for us to post it than it potentially can be for City of Greater Bendigo. A much bigger website, a bit more bureaucracy to get through. Certainly go to ours and download that. Excellent. That concludes our webinar today. I wonder if you could help me out by just giving me one little piece of feedback, perhaps just a word. Thank you for thanking me. My pleasure. Perhaps you could give me just a quick indicator of. It's all right. My pleasure. About where you think you might get the most benefit, which part of this process that you think you could get the most improvement by concentrating on. Which are the 7 steps? And you can just put a number in if you like. Steps 1 to 7. Do you think you need to improve your rapport? That's a 1. Do you think in building? Do you think you need to improve your questioning? That's a 2. Do you think you need to improve your area? Do you think you need to... Thank you. Fantastic. Getting lots of responses here, asking questions, determining need. Might you need to improve your knowledge about your own products and services and the benefits, and thinking about what's the benefits of that. Thank you very much about creating urgency. Thanks for that. Might you need to actually transition better? Might you need to be able to have your objections already pre-framed? My suggestion is understand what your top 5 objections are now and have a response to them already considered. Might you need simply to actually close? So look, thank you very much for being on the webinar today. Again, I really appreciate your feedback and really appreciate the fact that you've actually spent time working on your sales process today. I have to say, go away and actually work even harder on it. Change something in your sales process, measure it, really measure your conversion rate, and then break it down and see where your changes need to be. Look forward to perhaps hopefully joining you all again on the next one, next webinar, or perhaps seeing you at a seminar, or perhaps getting an email from you to potentially look at a little bit of one-on-one help. Okay, we'll close the seminar. I'll stop the recording